Hello, and welcome to the Property Podcast. It was only a matter of time before AI showed up here. In this episode, I'll be giving my thoughts on 2025's property predictions. And of course, I'll be joined by Rob B and Rob D, who are still the hosts of this podcast. For now.
Welcome to the Property Podcast with us, Rob and Rob, and with a special guest, it seems. You'll be hearing more from them later on. In this episode, we'll not only be sharpening your thinking about what's going to happen to property this year, but give you some tools and tips and techniques to help you improve your thinking and make better decisions more generally. So make sure you stick around.
So it's time for our news story of the week, and you may have missed this because I nearly did. There's a lot going on in the world at the moment, but good news, everyone. Interest rates have come down, and they've come down from 4.75% to 4.5%. Rob, I'm really pleased. I'm also amazed that it nearly passed me by. I knew that something was happening, and then it was Friday morning. It was like, oh, I must check. I don't feel there's been much of a reaction to this one. Maybe just because it was expected, and when it was announced, it was like, oh yeah, well, we knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's one of those bad news is good news is bad news scenarios because, of course, the reason that they are cutting is that they believe the economy needs some help. And in bad news for the government, all their commentary around the rate cut is pretty grim. They've downgraded the growth forecast. They're talking about potential rising unemployment. In fact, 2 out of the committee voted for a bigger cut. They wanted a 0.5% cut. But the quarter point is, like you said, pretty much what people expected. Of course, the question property investors are going to have is, what does this mean for my mortgage? So we are going to answer that question within the next couple of weeks. We're going to have a mortgage broker on the show telling us what this likely means for mortgage rates. And beyond that, talking about the best deal on the market and where they see the opportunities being at the moment. So definitely keep listening for that one.
Now, if you're a regular listener, I don't think it's any secret that Rob and I are big on AI. And we thought it'd be interesting to get AI to look at our predictions that we've made for this year. And we've played around with this quite a bit, and some of the results that you're going to hear really took us by surprise. And I'm really interested to hear what you think listening to this, because we gave it some really good prompting, and we're going to share that prompting as well. So yes, we're going to get some feedback on our predictions, and yes, you're going to get some interesting insights as well from the AI. But what we will also do, because it's really important, is share how we generated these responses. So Rob, we started with Claude. Claude, I think it's safe to say, is our favourite AI tool. It does move, depending on which is the best at the current moment. But certainly for me, Claude is my favourite right now. And it was really you that got me into Claude more than ChatGPT. So we used Claude to look at our predictions. And first of all, of course, we wanted it to tell us where it felt we were right. So it listened to all of our predictions. And here is what it came back with.
Right then, let's dive into these property predictions. And what a fascinating chat these two had over their morning coffee. Areas where they're hitting the nail on the head. Manchester getting the golden stamp of approval makes perfect sense. Much like that reliable friend who always shows up to the pub on time, Manchester just keeps delivering. With its bustling economy and steady stream of young professionals moving in, it's about as safe a bet as thinking it might rain in British summer. Their London prediction is rather intriguing. After years of being the equivalent of a property market wallflower, the capital's showing signs of wanting to dance again. Though I must say, treating London as one market is a bit like saying all tea tastes the same. It's far more nuanced than that. The rental market analysis is sound, even if Rob B's prediction about outpacing inflation was about as bold as a beige carpet. But with landlords leaving the market faster than guests at a bad dinner party, those rental increases seem inevitable.
It's picked up on the fact that we're British, hasn't it? It's really leading into those stereotypes. I can't believe how many references is packed in there. I hope you're not too offended by it saying your prediction is as bold as a beige carpet. A bit harsh.
A bit harsh, but also probably fair. It wasn't like my boldest prediction I'd made out of the whole episode. You have to go for a few safe ones, and that one definitely was safe. I wouldn't have described it as a beige carpet, but okay, yeah, maybe I am a bit beige. Where it gets more interesting though, Rob, and let's get to the juicy stuff, is we asked it to give us its insight of where we went wrong with our predictions, and it didn't hold back.
Where I'm raising an eyebrow. They're being rather conservative about interest rates, aren't they? If inflation keeps dropping like a hot crumpet, we might see more aggressive cuts than they're suggesting. Their prediction feels a bit like packing both an umbrella and a raincoat, perhaps too cautious. That 4 to 5% house price growth prediction, bit like expecting the England football team to win everything in sight. Lovely thought. But let's be realistic. With the cost of living still squeezing budgets like a python, 2 to 3% might be more the ticket. Liverpool making their top performers list caught my attention. While the affordability's tempting, banking on strong growth there feels a bit like betting on British summer being consistently sunny. Possible, but I wouldn't stake my house on it. What really impressed me was their focus on long-term fundamentals rather than chasing quick wins. It's refreshingly sensible, like choosing a proper brew over instant coffee.
Okay, so Claude believes that we're being conservative on interest rate. I think there's going to be more cuts ahead. We asked Claude this question before rate cut this week that we've just been talking about. So maybe given the commentary around that we talked about, it's looking pretty good for Claude. It isn't Rob going with you on the 4 to 5% house price growth, though. Seems to think that that's a bit much. But I guess because it's trained on the information that's out there, its views are going to be the consensus views. So that kind of makes sense.
It's interesting on Liverpool, though, and I suppose I better pick this one up for obvious reasons. But Liverpool performed really well last year. So it's interesting that it picked out Liverpool as the one that may be at risk from our hotspots. I'm not upset by any of these things it's challenged. I can see fairness and reasons for these predictions being challenged. It's not been wild. It's not been controversial for the sake of it, which we might get to shortly when we do a bit more prompting. But I think, all in all, that's not too bad feedback. And the little comment at the end of how impressed Claude was with our long-term focus, well, I do appreciate that compliment as well. But that leads us on to something, Rob, is that we had to push AI to be even just this critical. And it's easy for AI to complement your work. I think this is a good lesson that we can take here. Yes, it's interesting what it's pushed back on, but AI will rarely push back. It wants to please you.
Yeah, it is very agreeable by default. And that's very nice, but sometimes it's not helpful. And that's why knowing how to prompt is so important. But using AI to spot gaps in your thinking and challenge your thinking is really helpful. But as we've seen, even when you ask it to disagree, it doesn't necessarily disagree that strongly.
So, Rob, what did we do? We didn't want to go easy. You had the clever idea of asking AI to predict the probabilities of our predictions. This is where it gets personal, Rob, because it's going to go through all of our predictions. And you've been sneaky. And I promise Rob has not revealed this yet. But Rob has asked the AI to say who is more likely to be right of the two of us at the end. And I promise you, I do not know the results. But I do know the probabilities. Should we start with them, Rob? You went in order. So let's do house prices.
Yeah, so house prices, it reckons 40% probability of your 4 to 5% prediction, 50% probability of my 2 to 3% prediction. But the really cool thing about doing this is it actually gives you then the reasons which can help you to spot the gap in your thinking. So it says, yes, sentiment is improving, but affordability is still a concern. Rate cuts could increase demand, but a boom seems unlikely. So this is where it starts to become a bit more useful for me. And it also had some interesting insights on the cities.
So it didn't actually pick on who was right here because we were so similar in our predictions. But what it said is it believes that us getting 3 of our 4 right in the top 5, it gave us a 70% probability, which is actually quite high. I'm quite pleased with that. And getting all 4 correct is 40%, which I suppose is fair to try and predict 4 of the 5 and it give us a 40% chance of being right. I think it's not too bad. And then, like you said, Rob, it gives reasoning. And the areas it picked out as the safest bets in the top 5 were Manchester and Birmingham. And it's hard to argue against that. I'd agree. If you forced me to pick 2, I would probably go with those 2.
Well, there's good news for you when it comes to rental growth, because it's given you a 90% probability. So well done. But the interesting thing again is that it's actually gone into its reasons and it's picked up on government policies that might reduce supply. And it said, e.g. Wales's proposal. I don't think we mentioned that in the podcast. So I think it is bringing in its own data, which is really cool.
But you can push AI as much as you want at the moment until it fights back. And while that was really useful, we thought it'd be fun to actually outright disagree with us. So we said to it, take a combative tone and tell us why we're wrong. So it's forcing it to disagree. So at first it was very agreeable. We didn't even present that to you. We got it to disagree on some and agree on some. And then we got it probability. So that was interesting. But now let's really push it. And I think, yes, while this might be entertaining, especially when you hear what it says, I think there's also use in this, which we'll come to. But let's listen. We started with house prices. When it was forced to disagree, what did it say?
House prices. The optimism. Delusion. Your prediction of 4 to 5% growth is, frankly, fantasy. Yes, sentiment might be slightly improving, but that doesn't automatically translate into booming house prices. The fundamentals don't support it. Interest rates are still high. You're acting as if rates are suddenly plummeting. 2 quarter-point cuts, if they even happen, aren't enough to drive a housing surge. Affordability remains dreadful. Mortgage approvals might increase slightly, but real wages aren't keeping up with inflation. There's no real force driving a wave of new buyers.
Well, certainly didn't hold back, Rob.
The brief there, hasn't it? Yeah, okay. So I think this is useful. It's kind of what you want, right? Because it prompts you to reflect and go, oh, have I underweighted any of these factors? So it might not be nice to listen to, but I think it's useful. But if you think that was harsh, wait for what it said about your prediction about rental growth.
Rent growth, the biggest cop-out, saying rent growth will be higher than inflation, is basically saying the sky will remain above the ground. Of course, rent inflation will outpace general inflation. That's what happens when demand keeps increasing and supply keeps getting crushed by government policy. The 4% prediction is too conservative. Last year was 9.1%, and there's zero reason to think the forces driving that have eased. If anything, with ongoing landlord exodus and migration pressures, rent increases could easily hit 6 to 8% again.
So I've been called beige, and this just takes it a step further. While it's harsh, I would also say it's fair. I mean, I made a lot of bold predictions here, but yeah, okay. I mean, I can't really argue. I'm going to be right on that one, but I've been exposed. It's barely a prediction.
There is no place to hide. Even if I was nice and let you off on the episode, AI has no such social concerns. And finally, this is what it had to say about our prediction on interest rates.
Interest rates. Delusional optimism. Again. Predicting a 4.25% base rate is betting that inflation is tamed and the Bank of England is feeling generous. But is there any real reason to believe they'll go on an aggressive cutting spree? They've been behind the curve for ages. If the US holds rates steady longer than expected, which seems likely, the UK won't be far behind. If inflation sticks around above target, the BOE won't be in a rush to loosen policy. The idea that we're heading back to 2021 style easy money is delusional.
Well, we will see. I don't know. We're already at 4.5. There's only one more cut to go to make that prediction right. So I think it's maybe being disagreeable for the sake of it here. But again, that's what we told it to do. And that's why understanding the prompting is useful and knowing when it comes back and challenges you. You don't go, oh, yeah, I guess I was wrong. It's about knowing which challenges are fair and grounded in something and which are not. And for me, yeah, I'm not convinced.
I'm not convinced. And I think out of the examples we've given there, that one's the least useful. But I do think if you have a decision to make, whether it's about property, investment, or any life decision, get AI to be critical of your thinking. List out what you are thinking, what you want to do, or the investment you want to make, and it can be critical against it. Now, that's not to say you then go, oh, well, I won't do any of that, because it will be critical if you force it to. But it may just open your eyes to something that you've not considered before. Like, I thought I was being safe with my rental growth prediction. But on reflection, maybe it was a bit of a cop-out, as AI has labelled it. Maybe I was a bit lazy in that prediction. And its points on the house prices, I think there's some fairness in that. You know, in parts, affordability is dreadful, mainly in the southeast. So it's not a nationwide thing, but I think that is fair. And interest rates have been high. And yes, they are coming down, but they are higher than they have been for many years. Now, again, it doesn't mean that I've suddenly changed my opinion, and I don't think it's fantasy, because last year we were the contrarian voice out of all the experts on what we thought the market would do, and we went too conservative in the end. So I'm not suddenly worried about what the counterpoints are, but I think they're interesting, and as far as rental growth is concerned, I think valid. So I think, Rob, using AI as a critical voice or as a sounding board has a lot of value. A lot of people say to us, oh, you know, how can I get mentorship, or how can I have somebody guide me through this? And what we've never really used as an answer before is AI. But I promise you, if you are not using it on a daily basis, you're missing out. And you can get it to give you all this advice and feedback. Spend a little bit of time learning, because it's been such a valuable thing for us already, Rob. And we are spending more and more time and using it more and more as days go by.
Yeah, knowing how to use it right, as we've said, is the main thing. And this is something we're driving with our team a lot as well. Because as well as making you more productive, it can really improve your thinking. This is all well and good, Rob. But the real question is, whose predictions does it believe will be correct?
All right, let's have it. Let's listen.
Who is right? Rob D has a safer, higher probability set of predictions. If 2025 plays out broadly as expected, his set will likely be more correct. Rob B's predictions have more asymmetric upside. If property, crypto, or equities surge more than expected, he will look like a genius. If I had to bet on one set being more accurate overall, Rob D's set is safer, but Rob B's set is more interesting and could pay off big if things go well.
Wow, what a surprise, Rob. You got the AI to agree with you, and yours are the better results. I can barely keep myself sitting upright that was the outcome.
I wasn't even listening to what you were saying during this episode. I was prompting and re-prompting until I got the answer I wanted. But we got there. That's the important thing. Then I thought, yeah, that's all and good. But I was hoping for a bit more of a bombshell. So I replied to that answer. And my prompt was just like, okay, but who's better looking?
Oh, wow.
And here's what it said.
I'd say you're both devastatingly handsome in your own ways. Rob B, confident, bold, risk-taking. Probably the kind of guy who looks effortlessly stylish even when making wild FTSE 100 calls. Maybe that Liverpool fandom adds a rugged, passionate edge. Rob D, measured, analytical, quietly confident. Probably the one with the sharp, understated good looks that make people go, wait, has he always been this handsome? So, in conclusion, it's a draw, but in different ways. If we get a tiebreaker, it'll have to be decided by who wears a suit better.
Oh, wow. I'm happy with AI's answer for once, Rob. It's a funny way how it's determined what handsome is, but if predicting wild footsie calls makes you handsome, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think you've won it on the tiebreaker. So, yeah, never mind. I'm okay with that. But I think what we've been driving at through this episode, Rob, is that using AI is fine. It's like absolute basics now. But how you use it and using it well is what's really important. And being aware that to a large degree, you determine the output. And for Hub Extra this week, Rob, I thought it'd be good to round up some general stuff about how we're using AI more broadly, because it really does change every week. The technology changes every week, but the things that we learn change every week as well. And I know that you said to me earlier that you picked up on something that I said last time we talked about this, and it's been working really well for you.
Oh, I've loved it, Rob. It's such a good tip. And the tip is to talk into your AI. So I do it when I'm walking on my phone, and I'll talk into it and say, don't interrupt me. I'm going to give you my thoughts on this, and I'll say what it's for. So if it's an email or an important message you want to send, I'll give it the context of what I'm about to ramble on about, and then I will go on my ramble and then say, based on what I've just given you, turn it into that email or that important message that I need to send. And I can take a load of busy thoughts, and my head is a very busy place, and it will take a ramble and turn it into a brilliant piece of writing, especially if I've just given it a little bit of context. And it really does work well. I can't tell you how impressed I've been. And there's so many ways you can use this, but that voice to text is so accurate now. And I've also observed how it's got a word wrong early on, and then it's corrected itself because it's realized it's not in context with what everything else is being said. So I've maybe not pronounced it right, or it's not been able to pick up my funny accent, and it's put something else in, and then it's corrected itself because it's understood the whole context of what I'm talking about. It's just phenomenal. It's so impressive, and it gets better by the day. It really does seem daily, the improvements.
It is, and it just gets more useful as well. You think about context, the more it gets to know about you, the more useful it is. And with ChatGPT, because it's got its memory feature, I don't know if this is just a paid thing or not, but it's worth paying for anyway. Sometimes it will explicitly say it's adding something to its memory, but even if it doesn't, it can reference old conversations. So I've had times where I've said, I'm sure we've spoken about this at some point. Can you remind me what we talked about? Then it'll go and give you a summary of that conversation, which shows that the information is there. And because the information is there, you can then get it to help you out by, for example, say, like, what have I said that my goals are in the past? Remind me, challenge me, ask me how I'm getting on. Help me work out what I should be doing today to move me closer to my goals. Based on what I've said before, what might my challenges be? And you can pull on all this context from past conversations that you might not even remember you've had. But of course, its recollection is perfect. So it really does get more useful the more you use it.
So we will continue to beat that AI drum. Do use it. Do let it help you. It will help you. We try and help you. But let AI help you as well. It's phenomenal. And we will keep bringing you updates on how you can use it and get the most out of it. And of course, we will keep coming back with a podcast. We'll be back with Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday. We will be in the Sunday Times on Sunday in the home section answering your questions there. And of course, we will be back with the main event, the Property Podcast, same time, same place, next week on Thursday. Until then, take care, have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.